The old woman hadn't answered her door in 2 days, and the single father, standing on her porch, carried a bag of groceries and a growing sense of fear. He knocked one last time, his heart pounding. Then the door slowly opened, and the face staring back at him made the groceries slip from his hands. It was the CEO who had destroyed his career, the man who had fired him without mercy 6 months earlier. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness always finds its way back and that people deserve second chances, please like this video, comment below, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Soul Tales for more emotional stories that touch the heart. 6 months earlier, Daniel Carter had everything a simple man could ask for. He worked as a senior accountant at one of the biggest construction companies in the city. The pay wasn't extraordinary, but it was enough to provide a decent life for his 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Since losing his wife to cancer 4 years earlier, Daniel had become both father and mother to the little girl. Every morning, he braided her hair awkwardly, packed her lunch, and promised himself that no matter how hard life became, he would never let her feel the emptiness left by her mother's absence. Then everything changed. A large financial mistake happened in the company. Millions of dollars had disappeared from a major project account. The executives needed someone to blame. Although Daniel had nothing to do with the missing money, he was called into the CEO's office and dismissed immediately. The CEO, Richard Lawson, barely looked at him before signing the termination papers. Years of loyalty disappeared in less than 10 minutes. Daniel begged for an opportunity to explain, but the decision had already been made. Without his job, bills piled up quickly. His savings vanished. He sold his car, then his late wife's jewelry, and eventually moved with Lily into a small apartment on the edge of town. Every night, after putting Lily to sleep, he sat alone in the kitchen, wondering how he had gone from a respected employee to a man struggling to pay rent. But even during his darkest days, one thing remained unchanged. Every evening he visited his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Brooks. She was 82 years old and lived alone in the small house beside their apartment building. Her children lived in different states and rarely visited. Daniel first met her when she dropped a grocery bag in the parking lot and struggled to pick up the scattered vegetables. Since then, helping her became part of his daily routine. He fixed her broken shelves, changed light bulbs, carried her groceries, and brought her homemade soup whenever she seemed lonely. Lily loved visiting her too. The old woman often baked cookies and told stories about the city from 50 years ago. Sometimes Daniel wondered why he continued helping others when his own life was falling apart. But every time he saw Mrs. Brooks smile, he remembered something his late wife used to say: "Kindness is the only thing that never leaves us poor." Weeks turned into months. Daniel found temporary jobs delivering packages and cleaning offices at night. He slept very little and often skipped meals so Lily could have enough to eat. One rainy evening, Mrs. Brooks noticed how exhausted he looked. She gently placed her hand over his. She didn't ask questions. She simply thanked him for being there. That small gesture almost made him cry. Because sometimes people don't need solutions. They only need someone to notice their pain. Then, one afternoon, Mrs. Brooks didn't answer her door. Daniel assumed she was sleeping. The next day, there was still no answer. On the third day, fear filled his heart. He bought groceries and walked to her house, praying she was safe. When the door opened, his entire world stopped. Standing before him was Richard Lawson. The CEO looked different. His expensive suits were gone. His face seemed older and tired. For several long seconds, neither man moved. Daniel felt anger rise inside him. Memories of losing his job and watching his daughter cry because they had to leave their home flooded back. But before he could say anything, he noticed something unexpected. Richard's eyes were red from crying. He stepped aside silently. Inside the house, Mrs. Brooks sat in a wheelchair, looking weaker than Daniel had ever seen her. Only then did he learn the truth. Mrs. Brooks was Richard Lawson's mother. Years earlier, a bitter family argument had separated them. Richard had become consumed by business and success. They barely spoke anymore. But when his mother's health suddenly declined, he rushed back to care for her. Mrs. Brooks smiled softly when she saw Daniel. She explained that she had told her son everything, about the single father who visited every day, about the man who repaired her sink, brought groceries, and kept her company when nobody else did. She also told him about Daniel losing his job. Richard looked ashamed. For the first time, the powerful CEO understood the pain his decisions had caused. Over the next hour, Mrs. Brooks spoke about kindness, forgiveness, and loneliness. She told her son that wealth means very little if nobody remembers you with love. As the evening grew darker, Richard finally confessed something shocking. Daniel had never stolen anything. An internal investigation had recently discovered that another executive had been responsible for the missing money. That executive had manipulated evidence and used Daniel as a convenient scapegoat. Richard had trusted the wrong people, and an innocent man had paid the price. The CEO lowered his head. For the first time in his career, he admitted he had failed someone. Daniel expected anger to return, but instead he felt exhausted. Months of suffering had drained every ounce of hatred from his heart. All he wanted was peace. Over the next several weeks, he continued visiting Mrs. Brooks. Surprisingly, Richard was always there. The two men slowly began talking. They prepared meals together, helped the old woman into the garden, and listened to her stories. Something changed between them. Richard saw what true character looked like. Daniel saw a man filled with regret. One evening, Mrs. Brooks handed Daniel an old photograph of herself with her late husband. She smiled and said that kindness often travels in circles. People never know when it will return. A few days later, she peacefully passed away in her sleep. At her funeral, Richard stood beside Daniel and Lily. The wealthy CEO cried like a little boy. After the service ended, he handed Daniel an envelope. Inside was a formal letter. It offered Daniel his old position back, with a higher salary and full compensation for the months he had suffered. But there was something even more meaningful. A handwritten note. It simply said, "I cannot undo your pain, but I hope I can spend the rest of my life deserving your forgiveness." Daniel looked at his daughter standing beside him. He thought about all the nights they struggled, all the moments when giving up seemed easier. Then he remembered Mrs. Brooks and her gentle smile. Kindness had finally found its way home. Daniel accepted the offer, not because he wanted revenge or success, but because he believed people could change. A year later, he became one of the company's most respected leaders. Under his guidance, employee policies changed, and no worker could ever again be fired without a fair investigation. Mrs. Brooks had left behind more than memories. She had transformed two broken men. Before this story ends, please tell us in the comments, do you believe one act of kindness can change someone's entire life? And if this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to Soul Tales so more people can hear stories that remind us to never stop being kind. Because sometimes the door we knock on for someone else ends up opening the future we never expected.